Fantastic. Is this going to be anybody interested? None of you. Aisha, who did you speak to?
I was hoping to speak to you, Idris, but you were...
I'm not in your group, no.
This is the detail, is it? Yeah, but you're not supposed to be in our group to talk to us.
Call young fella. You the black July. Who did you speak to?
He spoke to the vampire.
I'm in the wrong place. I told you first I'm in the wrong place.
And we'll have some response. Let's see, who did you speak to?
Only answer. I couldn't get to the back.
And Ian, sir, who did you meet?
I spoke to the very interesting Atifa Shah, who's sitting behind me. She works for Accenture. She's from a posh part of the country, Rochdale. She's a business developer.
What?
Rochdale.
Rochdale.
Yeah. It's not as bad as you think.
Okay, good. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that and made some contacts. I'll pass it back to the next part of the show. Thank you.
How did I know he was going to do that? Well, first of all, I hope you enjoyed that and found that useful. You'll have an opportunity, I don't even really need this, you'll have an opportunity to network properly towards dinner time again. So again, try to speak to people that you don't know very well. The next guest speaker that we've got is John Reist, and I'm absolutely delighted to say that he's the new dean within the management school. Now, in terms of John, I've got a whole list of accolades that he's got, but he's been the former director of MSc programs within Leeds University. He's been involved within Hull University. So John will be talking to us about his new role, but also talking to us about where he feels that PMI could fit in with what the university is involved in. Welcome, John.
Throw these away then.
Yeah. No. You say what you... Do you need this or?
We'll see. I don't think so. Can everyone hear me in the back? Yeah, okay. Thank you for inviting me along. I think I'll do without that actually. Yeah, cheers. I wanted the opportunity to speak to you perhaps a little bit about the School of Management. Many of you perhaps are from the local area or reasonably from the local area, but I see that many people are actually from further distance away as well. The School of Management, which I'm now very, very pleased to be Dean at, has been around for nearly 50 years. It's one of the oldest schools of management or business schools in the UK. So we're well established, good quality. You may have thought that the number one school or business school in the north of England is somewhere else, but it's actually in Bradford. Okay, so something to be very, very proud of. And that's not according to us, that's according to the FT. We're now triple accredited in terms of various quality accreditations. The top European accrediting body, the top US accrediting body, and the top accrediting body for the MBA as well. So we put a lot of effort into maintaining the quality and building the quality of the school over time. We are a research-led school. I think that the university's had a long tradition of investing in research, and that's no different for our school. We've got particular areas of expertise around human resources and leadership, around innovation and enterprise and family business, interestingly, and also in the area of corporate social responsibility. So we've got a particular new emphasis around something called the circular economy, which is about trying to engineer and develop products in a way that uses less resources or reuses resources over time. So we're very much research focused, but our research is very much about a practical application. So we've always been sort of very relevant in terms of what we do. We've got a whole range of different degree programs, from undergraduate degrees in terms of different subject areas like accounting and finance, and I recognise some people from the previous event as from some of our students in the accounting and finance area, but also business, HRM, etc. We do a whole range of master's degrees, and we also do executive MBA as well as full-time MBA. There's some details I think here tonight in terms of some scholarships that we've got available, because it's now our 50th year, so we put together some 50th anniversary scholarships that people can try and apply for, and the closing date's the end of this month. But in addition to that, I think we'd be interested in talking to anyone who is interested in coming to us for an MBA degree, for example, and it may well be that we can talk about particular discounts given your PMI membership, because we want to try and build relationships with PMI going forward. So that's all I really wanted to say about the school in terms of what we are, our standing, the sorts of programs that we've got, and we're very much research led. Let me just say a little bit more now about the future and how I see the school developing. We do want to invest in the school over time, build up the research base even more, invest in those areas of strengths I mentioned, but also build up links with businesses. We've always had strong links with business, but I think we can be stronger still. I myself, in terms of a local area, on one of the sort of lobby groups, Bradford Matters, in order to try and regenerate the local area, and obviously that's got business links there. But we're very keen to try and do whatever work we can with PMI for our own benefit, partly in terms of developing our portfolio, but to try and aid PMI and its members along the way as well. So I'm confident that if we haven't got something within our portfolio, that we're happy to talk about things that we might be able to develop going forward. So that's really all I wanted to say around the school. About myself, I've been introduced in terms of my background. I've been in academia for 20 years now, and prior to that in industry, working in 3 blue chips in marketing. The standing up and talking to people isn't a problem in that sense, because I had to present at Salesforce conferences and things like this on many occasions. But happy to answer any questions about the school, and I think I'm going to get some difficult questions for the evening. Okay, so thanks very much.
So thank you for that, John. I've got some questions for you, but beyond that, I'm sure there's going to be people in the audience that might have some of their own that are equally challenging. The next person we've got up is the Lord Mayor of Bradford, Chancellor Hussain. So I'd like to ask you to give him a warm welcome to say a few words. Thank you.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here. It's a great privilege and honor that I'm invited to the PMI networking dinner. This morning was touch and go whether I would be able to come or not. But when I decided to come, actually, even though I'm not feeling that well, that I have to live in Keighley, and Javed also lives in Keighley. I was asked actually to say something about our departing guests tonight, and also my own take on professionals, what role they play in making change. And can I say something from personal experience, that when I see tonight that so many ladies, quite confidently sitting in this gathering, if I go back and I share my experience with you, that when I first came in late 60s and went back to Pakistan, and my 3 young sisters, I got them admission to school. And my father, obviously not very receptive to that, because in those days the perception was the women should not be getting that education. And luckily actually that they got to the primary school education, and then they were removed from the education. So I went back again and got them readmitted to middle school. But then by then, because of the local environment there, unfortunately actually could only complete to middle. Here, when I was obviously I was the first one from the family able to see the education, and I used to go with all my nieces and nephews to the open nights, open evenings in the school. And my niece, she was only 12, at Old Dean School, when the teacher asked me there, will you be sending her to university? And I took that question by surprise, that she's only 12, what are you talking about? But obviously the teacher was talking from experience, and she said she had the ability that she could be studying literature at Oxford at the age of 12. And you can tell. And when she completed O levels and A levels, and then I realized, the question, why she was asking that question. My cousin, may Allah bless him, is no longer with us. He said, well, that's the end of it. And when I heard that, I said, no, that's the beginning of it. She has the abilities, and she ought to be given that opportunity, and I fought for her. And well, he said the environment around us is not conducive and all sorts of issues. And I said, well, whether it is or not, the least you could do is to make sure that she gets admission to the local university, and you play your role in dropping her off and picking her up if you have any concern. So she got the admission at Bradford University. She qualified in engineering and management, and she was part of the arranged marriage, and that was the beginning. And I feel proud from that obviously I played that part. And today in my own extended family we have 50 graduates. It's equal amount of girls and boys, women and men. So that, coming from the perspective when I see tonight and I see the chair of this evening is a lady, it gives me immense pleasure to say that we have moved. It's a sea change, what I have seen and what we begin to see now. And to me, the people like yourselves, who are professionals, who are intellectual, inspirational, who have expertise, could play a vital role actually, not only within the profession that you work actually, but in the wider context. As a Bradford, we have many challenges. I was talking to Mark early on, and I think you know very well actually, that education is one of the key challenges we are facing, especially with PMI community. And when I stood for election last year, I made a pledge actually that there ought to be a change. If there is no change, I don't think I can really go back to the voters and say that I'm capable of leading them. And I said to my portfolio actually that before I became Lord Mayor, I'll make sure that you go before I go actually. So there must be a commitment, and see, it must be a commitment that we need to make. And when we look at the challenges, in Bradford about the education, unemployment, rising the young population, and there's a wider challenge. And the wider challenge is where you, people like yourselves, may play even a more vital role. And that is what we see in our street, what we saw a couple of weeks ago, what happened in Woolwich, what's happening around the world. We must play our part and not allow those criminals to hold people like yourselves to ransom. You need to play your part and tell them that that's not Islam which they're portraying. That is not the principles of Islamic principles which they are actually telling the world they are. And I think that your role is more crucial in that sense actually, to say we will not allow them to hold you to ransom, act of the few criminals. And this is where your role becomes very vital and very, very interesting in the long term. And that's the perspective I would like to come on actually, because I believe that those challenges, if we don't take them head on, if we don't acknowledge that there are problems, we will never be able to find a solution. And I do hope actually that through the organisation like PMI, they will be playing their role through the hard work and commitment and dedication of people like yourself. We will be able to bring the change, because in Bradford we have a lot of things, many things which unite us rather than divide us. And I hope actually that people like yourself will use your full potential, utilise your effectiveness, to the fullest possible, and we begin to see the change we wish to see. And they say actually, be the change you wish to see. So I'm only, without further ado, I'm only try to conclude at that it's a great pleasure for me once again. I'm invited to this PMI dinner, and I hope that end of the year when I leave this chair, I say that I've seen something during my year of office that I remember as a legacy. So thank you very much.
Lord, may I thank you for an absolutely fantastic presentation. I'm delighted that you feel so strongly about women's leadership and also women's empowerment, because I think we are at a stage for Bradford which is always in the media for adverse reasons, and I think with leadership like yourself and somebody from such a strong position that can advocate women's leadership, women's empowerment and women's education as well as community responsibility, we have a real chance to make change at the grassroots and through the business community. I was just feeling sorry for you wearing that necklace. I thought it must be roasting hot. You can lend it to me to go with my jacket at some point. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, today, see, the joke had to come in, but I tried. Today is very much about the guest speakers that we've got, but it's also about Professor Mark Cleary, who has given more than so many years of service to Bradford and to the university. Now, in terms of Mark, am I allowed to say your age?
Yeah, 58 years and 6 months.
Impressive.
3 days.
Mark, no, you're not going to tell me the minutes now, are you? No. Good. So Mark is the current Vice Chancellor of the University of Bradford, and he took this position in 2007 after the previous. Can someone shut their iPhone off, please? After the previous Chancellor, Chris Taylor, retired 5 years into the position. Mark joined us after earning a PhD in geography from Cambridge University, and he's going to talk to us a bit about his role in Bradford, what he's found out about it, but also about where he sees Bradford going. I think it's very important to realise that under Mark's leadership we have had a very strong University of Bradford, which has created extensive credentials for the city, probably one of the strongest institutions in the city at this moment in time. And for PMI, it's particularly important because PMI, the Professional Muslim Institute, its setup was through the University of Bradford, the management school, the likes of Nadra, Dr. Zaid Hussain, and all the other people who have been involved with the leadership of Mark Cleary. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Mark to come and say a few words, and I'm hoping that he will be able to quieten me for one moment.
Can you all hear me? Yeah. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me here. I will be leaving the university in a couple of weeks' time, having had 6.5 years, very, very happy years at the university and in the city. And I'm particularly pleased to come to a PMI meeting. I can remember, must have been 4.5 years ago, going down to the House of Lords with Nadra and with Javed for the launch of PMI. And as a university, we have been very conscious of the importance of PMI and the role that it can play in a whole range of different areas, not just narrowly for the university in the city, it's much wider than that in terms of what it does and what it stands for. What I thought I'd do very briefly is say a few words about my sense of what PMI is about, and then perhaps say a little bit about the city, and then I'm very happy to take any difficult questions that you want to fire at me, other than my salary, and we'll try and answer those, and I'm sure my colleagues here will as well. So PMI, 3 bits to it: Professional Muslim Institute. Let me take each of those words in turn and try to say how important they are. Professional. Now we know that the professions in the UK are largely populated by white, middle-class groups. And we know that a whole range of different groups in society have significant difficulties accessing the professions. The law, politics, business, those networks are dominated by particular groups. So professional organisation, professional mentoring and professional support are really important. In a very narrow sense, they're really important for our students. The majority of our students at Bradford, I'm very proud to say, are Muslim. They're probably 55% of our students. They need good role models, they need mentors, they need good examples of people from their community who've made a success, who are in the professions, who are in business, who are representative of those particular interests. That's never been more important. So that sense of professional solidarity, professional networks are really important. Now we know how you get access to power in this country, how you become a vice chancellor, how you become powerful in politics, and a lot of it is about networks. The key network in this country is of course around wealth and around land and around access. And those are dominated by particular groups. The only way that is going to change is by education, by professional organisations like yourself, mentoring and supporting each other, and by young people coming into these networks, seeing fantastic role models and taking hold of power. We are a multicultural country. We should have multicultural power in the country, but I don't think we do. Now, as a Vice Chancellor, you can read my CV, and I look to be classic blue blood. Privately educated, went to Cambridge, did my undergraduate and postgraduate degrees in Cambridge, and went into a university job, and eventually was so unsuccessful at that I became a Vice Chancellor. That is deception. Don't just judge by appearance. A little bit of personal background. I don't very often get personal, but I've only got 2 weeks to go. I'm in a very large family, 8 kids, an Irish Catholic family, so faith was always very important in my family. My father died when almost everyone in the family was aged less than 14. I was 9 at the time, so that's 8 kids, no father. I was lucky enough to get an assisted basis scheme. Rather than break the family up, they sent some of us to boarding school. So I went to boarding school, i.e. private school, from a very different background from most of the other kids at that school. And because of that, I was able to go to a good school and I was able to get a scholarship to go to Cambridge. So in a sense, from the outside I look to be absolute classic English establishment, but I'm not. And I think it's really important that people understand that you can get to power and you can succeed. You don't have to have that background. So professional organisations for me is absolutely critical, which is why I think the PMI is so important and so important to make it succeed. Muslim, what does that mean? Again, I am not particularly religious. I always say to people, ask me, are you religious? I say, no, I'm not, I'm a Roman Catholic. So, a bit about Catholicism, you'll understand that. But I know how important faith is. I know that whatever we think of different religions, I take the view, the premise, if you like, that there is always more good in a religion, in a faith, than there is bad. That's probably not a bad starting place, certainly in terms of Roman Catholicism. So Islam and the Muslim faith, I think, is really important, not just because of our geography, because we happen to be in a city where I think at the last census 26% of the population were of Asian heritage, and quite a large chunk of that population would be Muslim. More than half of our students are Muslim. So why is a professional Muslim institute important? I think it's important because that affiliation to a faith is not just about doctrine and theology, it's actually about all of the cultural and social power that comes from association with each other, from that shared heritage and that shared understanding of a particular faith community. So a faith community, for me, is actually about those organisations and those institutions that give people what I like to call cultural capital and social capital. And those two things are critical in terms of succeeding, of getting into power, of getting your views reflected in power. Cultural and social capital in England comes from the establishment. It comes from the Church of England, it comes from wealth, it comes from land, it comes from those kinds of things. And I think all communities in the UK rely on an affiliation to faith. So Muslim, the Muslim nature of this, I think, is really important. It gives you, I hope, a sense of cohesion, a sense of belonging. Obviously, all religions are very diverse. Islam is very diverse. but it gives you those role models, that mentoring, that community spirit and community power, which is so important, not just in the city of Bradford, but in the UK as a whole. We know that groups from particularly black and minority ethnic groups, BME groups, many of whom are Muslim, are underrepresented in the corridors of power. Your access to that power is through your power and your skills in business. And I think that connection between the professional and getting into the professions and succeeding and your particular faith affiliations are really important. You look at lots of other different groups, it works in the same way. For example, there is the Roman Catholic mafia, believe you me. And that is very interesting because on the one hand it's about blue-collar, working-class Irish immigrants, which is where I come from, against a 500-year-old landed gentry, very rich. So the communities are very diverse, but they are important, and faith, I think, is important in terms of how the PMI works. And that institute, I think, is something that I can remember when we were involved in launching PMI, what we wanted to see through that institute was all of those networks of support, that privileged access that so many other groups have to power and to education and to authority, to give this particular group access to those things. And so it's certainly in the university's interest, we wanted to see PMI grow and develop and produce really good role models and networks for our students, most of whom, the majority of whom, are Muslim, and who want to be professionals. They want to be going to business, they want to go into law, they want to become teachers, they want to become accountants and so on. And this is a great way of ensuring that they get a fair slice of the cake. So I do hope that in that sense that the PMI goes from strength to strength, because I think it's vital to the city and it's a fantastic way of capturing the energy that this community has in the city. Let me finish off with just a few observations about the city. What I will always take away, I came to Bradford from Plymouth, down in the southwest, by the sea, an overwhelmingly white population. The university that I worked at had about 30,000 students, of which probably 5 or 6% were PMA. So to come here, you come to a very different environment, but it's the energy and the enthusiasm that I will take away from me. That is what you find at the university, and that is what you find in the city. And I think that comes from this drive to succeed in business, to be entrepreneurial, to achieve the highest positions in the professions, in law, in finance, in teaching. We want to see people in the city progressing to those positions. Obviously, if you look at the city itself, it gets a terrible press. We know that. We can't do anything about that. Not until you lot get in and control the media. And then we might get a different message, but we know it gets a terrible message. And in many ways, Bradford, I think, has suffered from the poor quality of local government over many, many years. I'm not making a party political point, whether one's Conservative or Labour. I think probably a Lib Dem, there was a Lib Dem party, I think, I'm quite sure. But whatever your political, you look at Bradford and you see a sense of neglect. And it doesn't deserve that neglect because you have this fantastic power and entrepreneurial skills and energy. And Bradford will change, it will develop, in the sense Bradford has had the unfortunate position of always being at the end of something. I remember it was sort of creating a bull ring, as you have in, I come from Birmingham, just at the time when Birmingham was starting to think, well, maybe we should knock the bull ring down and start again. Bradford's always been that little bit late. It has half of a ring road. The power that they didn't quite manage to get the thing. So that's not to be critical, but just to say there is that issue in Bradford, but I think the positives far outweigh the negatives. You've got a growing population in the metropolitan district. I don't think there's any other metropolitan district that has that. London, but London's very artificial. So we've got a young population. I agree with the Lord Mayor about the huge importance of education, not just higher education. I would say that, wouldn't I? And Bradford needs a fantastic university. But schools, primary schools, secondary schools, those are the areas where we've got to really focus. If we can have a young, well-educated, entrepreneurial, thriving population that takes advantages of networks and role models and mentors that we have here in this room, then the future for the city, I think, is very, very bright. So certainly I will have worked very, very hard to make sure the university is successful. There's always more that we could do. There's always frustrations. There's always things that I wish we had done to improve the position of the university. The best way that the university can help the city of Bradford is by being a first-class university. Our focus is very much on doing that, on getting our graduates into employment, into jobs, into business. So lots of real positives. People say, what are the negatives? I struggle to think of the negatives because it's such an enjoyable place to live and to work. I would certainly. So let me just finish by saying I really hope that PMI continues to be successful, continues to grow, continues to develop, and I know that anything that the university can do to help that, we will certainly do our very best to do that. Now, I have already spoken to my successor, who starts in a couple of months' time, about how important these networks are, not just to the city, but I think much, much wider than that as well. So, thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Mark. That was fantastic. And I think it just shows you, in terms of the type of commitment that Mark has shown to the city and the values he has, and what we've had for the last number of years. But I really hope that even though it may be farewell from the university, it's not farewell from PMI and from the businesses within Bradford, because we need people like yourself to be the ambassador for our local communities and also for our businesses. So I'm hoping that you will continue your commitment to PMI just as you started this process. We want this journey to continue with you. Now, what I want to do now, before I offer a series of questions to the floor, I have a number of questions myself that I'd like you to answer, and I want you to answer them as a critical friend and with brutal honesty, because what I think is very important for us as a community is not just to enjoy these events, to be able to hear where you feel our challenges are as a community, where you feel we have development needs, and how each of you in your roles, whether even if you may be leaving the university, for example, Mark, but you still have associations, you have networks, and you have contacts that us in this room may not have, how you would be able to help us, each one of you, within that. So, asking that, I don't know who wants to start by saying where they feel the challenges are for us as professional Muslims. You've been prepped, even if it was 15 minutes early.
I can start. I mean, marketing background, okay, and therefore my first response to that is I'd like to know an awful lot more about the community and PMI and the whole area before I, in a sense, launched into solutions. Because in a sense, how could I possibly do that? So that's the first thing I would say. I'm not sure I'm actually best prepared to answer that question. However, I know, speaking to Javed, with PMI, we're looking at developing a leadership program. Now it may well be, and certainly Javed feels that would be highly relevant to this group, but maybe a wider group as well. It seems strange to me, and we talked about this before we started, that both at the senior level within the university and also the senior level within the council, where is the community represented? And that seems a strange fact. And it's not sort of looking at the reasons behind that, but it is strange that hasn't happened. From my own experience within the School of Management, within the university, Mark said in terms of the proportion of different students that we've got within the university, we've got something that we need to tackle. One of the issues that we've got, and I'll explain the relevance of this, is that there's a performance gap between black and minority ethnic students and the rest of the students. performance gap in terms of the degree outcomes. Now, we've already started to talk about this in terms of how do we do something about this, because the gap is about a 20% difference in terms of outcome at the end of degree programs. Now, it seems to me that the PMI, in terms of mentoring, in terms of role models, in terms of support and guidance, can actually be very powerful. Because if these students are in a sense, the business people, the leaders of tomorrow, then it sounds like that they maybe need some support, some guidance, some encouragement, and perhaps some focus in terms of what they're doing. Because it seems to me that they can achieve a whole lot more than maybe they are doing at the moment. So I'd be very, very interested in seeing how we as a university can work with PMI in order to get rid of that gap. I'm really unhappy about it being there at all. So that's one thing I would say. But beyond that, it's really difficult to answer the question.
Okay, so it was a really difficult question.
It was.
Okay.
It was.
Okay.
I rightly said it. From my perspective, there are two challenges.
Can you just speak up?
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm not cutting you off.
As I said early on, from my perspective, there are two challenges. One is the lack of leadership amongst our community, and I think Mark mentioned I have to be very careful actually, because I'm wearing something that I need to seem to be impartial and not say something that put me in hot water. But I have said all along.
I don't mind wearing it.
Well, if the Chatham House rule applies, then I will be quite open actually. But I've said, there's the political leadership, the lack of political leadership with the vision in Bradford district since it became Metropolitan District Council. And I give you one example.
Can't hear anything back here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm a sore throat as well. What I'm saying is that from the last 35 years, since Bradford became the Metropolitan District Council, we lack the political leadership. And I give you a few examples of that. One is that you have interchange on one end from the transport perspective, and you have the Foster Square other end. There was a direct rail link between Bradford and London. We lost that. And Leeds has become not only the hub in terms of transport, but the fifth largest financial city in there. The second biggest problem that I think from our perspective is that I mentioned in my speech and Mark highlighted is education, the attainment level in primary and secondary schools, and even at university level, getting the highest degrees, highest marks. The graduates who left Bradford University, they left with a lower achievements there. So that is the biggest and massive challenge, because it's the education will produce the leaders of tomorrow. And if you don't sort that out, then we have big problems. And within the BME community, the Pakistani community, it's achievement less than 20% in 21st century. And those third and fourth generations born and bred in this country, it begs some serious questions.
I know, Mark, you've covered quite a bit already. Is there anything you'd like to add specifically relating to professional Muslims? Because some of the people that are here today are not just from Bradford.
No, I mean, the only time I've had my chance to lecture to you, give you a sermon, the only thing would be about leadership, and I look around the room and we've got very successful people, leaders, so there is an issue of leadership, but it's not the fact that there are a lack of leaders. You see that in the Muslim community. I mean, the best society in the university is Islamic society. Fantastically well organised, really good students. They insist on meeting me regularly. They regularly trip me up. They always get what they want. Eventually, those are the people. And people here are very, very successful. So it isn't that there aren't leaders. Maybe it's a question of confidence and saying, this isn't for somebody else, this is for me, this is mine. This is my community, this is my city. I've got as much right as anybody else to pontificate about the place. And I've only been here 6 years, and listen to me. I don't think I was born here. So it is something that is in there, just a lack of leaders, but have the confidence to go for it.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting that the leaders, as far as Mark sees, the leadership exists, but the representation doesn't. And maybe one of the things we need to look at is how do we change that that position so that the leadership is actually representing the city at all levels and making the city move forward in a positive way. Now, we're coming towards the last part of the speaking. You'll be glad you won't be here having to hear me much more, and I'll be very quiet, but is there any questions you've got for our speakers here? Sabri?
I really enjoyed today. I've come 3 or 4 times, and it's been really good, but today's been especially good. I've got a comment and a question. There were 2 articles in the Guardian this week. One article was that people who go to private schools, in comparison to secondary schools, what they achieve at universities is higher. And the second article was about Russell universities, pre-1992 universities, and what's happening with the proportion of people who attend. That's a comment you understand what I'm talking about. So my question is, given that we are in a recession, and particularly given the deprivation indices for Bradford and West Yorkshire too, what is your thinking about what's going to happen to university places? Who's going to be able to attend university? Because what we've had over the last 10-15 years is a different process. What are you going to do at Bradford University to tackle that issue? Okay, so that's a comment about those 2 articles and a question about what you do.
And the comment's very emphasised. I think the comment was that there are 3 private schools in the country and more kids to Oxbridge than 2,300 state schools. Now that is an indictment of, well, it's a perfect demonstration of class. It's an indictment of that system. There is also an issue around Russellbridge, about the 15 so-called top universities. And the rest, and the Russell Group don't recruit enough people, either from ethnic minorities or from disadvantaged backgrounds. Now, Bradford, I think, is number 2 in the country for the percentage of students that have from disadvantaged backgrounds. So we are very, we could hardly do any more. And we've done that from having links with schools, bursaries, scholarships and so on. And I wish that other universities would at least do a little bit but as far as Bradford is concerned, we are committed to doing what we do. There are a number of universities in the north that do very well in terms of intake. What is going to happen? Well, the new fee regime came in this year. Recruitment remains fairly buoyant, I think because of the loan system. I do not like that loan system. I think it's iniquitous. All of things remain tough against university because of that basis. But the loan system's not going to change. Whoever comes into power, I don't know if the government has ever reversed such a thing like that. And I'm a Labour Party supporter, and I'm sorry to have to say this, Labour introduced things in '97 and then up them again in 2005. So it's not a proud position. I think there's very little prospect of access to university widely much because the conditions over the last 10 years have been really good. We've had a well-funded system by and large. We've had an aim to get 50% of the age cohort into university. So they've never been better. And yet if you look at the progress over the last 10 years, it's pretty picturesque. I have to, I'm not being sort of puffing up Bradford at the time, but we have done very well in terms of our intake. We exceed all of our benchmarks, but other universities don't.
And just follow it up, just one more. I'm just building on what you said about being the change at Ambicus, being the change that you want to see in the world. Okay. So how representative is your university of the students that it serves in terms of ethnicity, student management, and wider? So first thing they say is, oh, put your own house in order before you tell anybody else to put theirs. So what have you done about that? So how representative?
Very good question. Our management is not representative, and our council is not representative. I mean, that would be the case in most universities. What are we doing about it? We've got a big leadership program within the organisation. So if you look at our non-management, if you look at our professors, for example, or our readers, who are the most senior And then in those areas we are improving quite dramatically. I think for one statistic there are 18 black African Caribbean professors in the country, and we have 5 of them. So we're nowhere near being represented, but we outperform most other universities. If you look at the BME ethnicity against percentage in different grades. So we've got a heck of a long way to go, and we're nowhere near represented here. So you're quite right. We need to get our own house in order. It's a long. You can't just promote people to professors. It's a long process. It takes a long time. But we're conscious of the fact that we fall short of where we'd like to be.
Any other questions? Okay, what I'd like to do is, first of all, say thank you to you all for coming. And we're going to have a little ceremony that Javed's going to just say a few closing words. But I want to say thank you to all of you as Muslim professionals that have come, but also to acknowledge and to say I'm very, very honoured that so many of the other friends of the Muslims are here today who may not be sharing the faith with us, but they share a respect and they value us as people and as professionals, whether from this district or beyond. And so I want to acknowledge that there's people here that are coming from not within our own community, and that they're giving their time, and for us to give a round of applause for them as well as Without further ado, I'm going to ask Javed to do the closing remarks and also to say a few words.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Lord Mayor, Vice Chancellor, Professor John Rees, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank the Lord Mayor for coming here today. I've known Councillor Khadim Hussain for a long time, so long that I bought my first car from him. Was that the one? It was a good car, actually. Thanks for I know today he wasn't feeling well, you see, when he rang me this morning saying he's not sure whether he can make it or not, you see, but thank you for coming along. I'd like to thank the Vice Chancellor, Cleary. He's been very supportive of the Special Muslim Institute. It was about 4 years ago when we launched at the Law Club Centre, University of Bradford. I know some of you were there today. And it's been supportive since then, and any initiative I've actually taken to Mark, he's always been very supportive. And thank you very much. I'm quite sure that we will continue to get a support from your successor as well. I'd like to thank John Rees. It was the first time I met him the last event. Last PMI went here, and he actually came along. And then following the event, actually, I met John Rees. And he was very supportive of